Salt Sanctuary is developed and published by Ska Studios. It is a 2D, side-scrolling action platformer RPG. That's a lot of adjectives, but I feel they're all necessary in describing what type of game it is and potentially recommending it for those who may feel like playing it. It's a 2D game, which should be of note because 2D games are, well, completely different in most cases from 3D games, in my opinion, and probably everyone else's opinion who have ever played a video game before. It's side-scrolling, which is very important to denote because not all 2D games are side-scrolling. Side-scrolling games, you traverse upon the X and the Y axis. In 2D games, you can also traverse and have combat upon the Z axis, which Ska Studios have done in the past, and I think it cheapens the art style and makes the game feel less organic. So it's nice that they made this game completely side-scrolling. It's an action platformer and RPG. These are two very generic genres that are important to note for whether you're going to like the game or not. While writing this review, I took a look at Ska Studios' previous games, such as Charlie Murder and the Dishwasher series, and it seemed to me that they combined what they were good at and adept at, 2D beat-em-ups, with what they loved, the Dark Souls series, and I feel like the combination was done well. Throughout this game, I will make several comparisons to Dark Souls, but I will try to limit myself because, in the words of ex-Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist John Frusciante, one should take things from art for what they are, not what you want them to be. You'll be able to appreciate it a lot more if you do that. However, there are a lot of mechanics taken from Dark Souls, so I will make the comparisons when they seem appropriate. Alright, you start the game on a ship with very little exposition, with no tutorial explaining the basic controls. You figure out normal basic movement and you fight, once again, basic mobs until you reach a fight with a boss, which the game very obviously wants you to die to. You end up on the shore of an island with a little more exposition and an old man who talks to you for a bit. You pick a creed, similar to Dark Souls, Covenants, kinda, except they don't involve multiplayer and they don't make much of a difference. I actually ended up sticking with one creed for about 75% of the game until somebody told me that there is a difference. It's negligible, but there are differences nonetheless. You continue until you find bottles on the ground, which fill you in on details you may have missed before, such as blocking, parrying, switching fighting styles, and more. These are told via messages on the ground, once again similar to Dark Souls. First by the developers, then later on by fellow players. I'm actually split on this mechanic. Usually I like to go through these games totally blind and have all the experiences for myself. But sometimes you're just walking along on the ground and then you see a bottle with nothing else nearby, and you'd usually know that it's going to denote a trap, completely negating the trap, since once you know they exist in this game, they're very easy to avoid. On the other hand, I don't really have the patience to find secret rooms and walls. There's a lot of them in this game, so I don't usually run up to every wall and press B a bunch of times until I'm satisfied that there's no secret room. So it's nice to see these bottles saying, hey buddy, we're going to help you out, there are some secret rooms nearby. I would be neutral on the mechanic, but there really should be an option in the menus making it so you can just turn these messages off. There isn't though, so if you don't want the messages, you're going to have to go offline with Steam or whatever service you're using. And that's a giant pain that I nor other people should have to go through, so I think the developers could have done a better job on that. You continue to find your first sanctuary, which is similar to the hubs in Dark Souls 2 and 3's Majula and Firelink Shrine. Here you can level up and interact with your NPC buds, like upgrading your weapons, buying items, and working for your creed. Speaking of leveling up, it's one aspect that's pretty different from Dark Souls. Instead of being completely on your own, deciding what to level up, there's a skill tree, which I do like. It's sort of like a helpful guide from the game, giving you suggestive tips on where you can go next. There are also shrines later, which are similar to the bonfires in Dark Souls, acting as checkpoints throughout the levels. There is one sanctuary per level, but there can be multiple shrines. Once you leave your first sanctuary, you find some enemies, pick up some items, you fight some more enemies, you come across a checkpoint that's somewhat close to the boss, so you have a close trek to him, and you fight the boss, which is marked with a candelabra with 10 candles. Each one's lit signifies how many people the last 10 to fight the boss have beaten it. I think this is a cool way to separate the boss from the rest of the level, similar to the Mega Man series. And the lit candles are a neat way of telling you if the boss is going to kick your ass or not. After you beat the game, you get some options of where you want to go next. That's the game, folks. That was supposed to be a comedic line, but it's really the truth, for better and for worse. There aren't a lot of gimmicks, so there isn't much time you're thinking, fuck this area, this sucks. But areas also run together in a bland way, and the overall dark misery atmosphere of the game never really changes. And hey, look out guys, because I'm throwing another Dark Souls comparison at you. Dark Souls is a dark and gloomy game as well, but there's contrast making for great memorable moments, i.e. Anor Londo in Dark Souls 1, Majula and the Gutter make for great contrasts in Dark Souls 2, and the sun turning red and bloody in Dark Souls 3, signifying a major change in the world. These are all experiences which make these games great and memorable for me and many alike. This doesn't really ever happen for me in Salt and Sanctuary. And speaking of unmemorable moments, the bosses in this game were, in my opinion, either too unmemorable from being piss easy or too memorable for being total bullshit. There were too many times when I felt that beating the boss depended on me getting good attacks from the boss that weren't total bullshit. And then when I finally did beat the boss, it didn't even feel good, like I had accomplished anything. I mean, they weren't all bad, but there was one boss where it was easy to dodge with his attacks, but there were fire beams that were coming out that were set on random intervals, and there were times when they all lined up, so you were forced to take hits. Another issue with bosses was the hitboxes on the big guys. I get that Ska Studios wanted variety to make the bosses interesting, and that's great, but the execution on the large bosses was pretty poor. There were too many times when the bosses were jumping at me or swinging their weapons at me that I couldn't tell where their hitboxes were and where I could be safe rolling to. There are boss attacks that one can't block, and rolling away from attacks was impossible due to either the large hitbox or a combination of fast attacks and slow, clunky rolling. The execution was pretty poor on a good chunk of the bosses. Since I'm a pretty poor writer, I have a bunch of things that I like and don't like that I didn't know how to fit in this review naturally, so I'm just going to list them off. The first is the base combat. It really does feel good, which is important in this type of game. I should also note that I did play a pure melee build with a medium-sized weapon other than using a bow to kite enemies, so I don't really know how well magic or other fighting styles might work. There are 2 attack buttons, a normal and strong attack. You can combine them in special orders in order to do combos, which you can even use to juggle enemies in air. I also liked the charge attacks. When you charge your normal attack, the game gives good feedback. The screen shakes and the game gives a little sound. Good feedback is incredibly important in games, and I'm glad the developers paid attention to it. Eventually, the enemies you fight do start to feel the same, which also leads to areas blending together like I mentioned earlier. Overall, though, the base combat in the game is really satisfying. Another aspect about this game that I really liked were the changes to your movements. There were really different aspects that changed how you traverse across the areas, such as changing the gravity in certain areas. There were wall flips that you could do, like in Super Metroid, and there were also mid-air dashes. I'm just a sucker for these. I think they really make the way you traverse throughout the game a really fun experience. The one negative part about these movements is that New Game Plus takes these special movement bonuses away. I get why they do it, is to try and keep you on script, going where the game wants you to go, avoiding script breaking. But man, we've already done the game the way you want us to do it. Now let us do our own thing. It's a lot more fun that way, and plus, going from having all these cool movement abilities to just being able to run and jump and roll, it really put a damper on my enjoyment and potential replayability of the game. For me anyway. For other people it may not be as big of a deal. Another positive aspect about this game is its replayability. RPGs almost always have a ton of it from the different playstyles, and this game is no different. Although I will likely not personally be playing the game again, those who do will have many options to pick from. In addition to the game's replayability is challenges. When creating a new character, you have several challenges to choose from, such as no healing, no blocking, and more. These can add additional challenge to those weirdos who want this game to be harder. I also have several aspects of the game that I didn't like, and some of them seriously affected my enjoyment of the game. And the first of these aspects is the openness of the game in combination with the lack of maps and bad shortcuts. This game, like Dark Souls, has many different options to go to. Many areas where you can explore and just dick around for a while. Unlike Dark Souls, this game is in 2D. It's much easier to get lost in 2D games than in 3D. I'm not totally sure why, but I feel like it has something to do with the verticality and just run around in little fucking tunnels all day. It's bullshit. I spent so much time running around the game just shouting, "Where do I go? Game, where do I go? Mom, where do I go?" This could be alleviated with a simple map. I get that Dark Souls doesn't have a map, but you don't need a map in Dark Souls. It does a great job of leading you where you need to go. This game doesn't. You just dig around until you happen upon where you need to go. Or you look it up. But nobody knows that. This game needs a map. It doesn't need to show where all the items you missed and whatnot are. I get that. You just want yourself and your tools from the developer's perspective, but a simple map would alleviate so many of the issues I had with this game. Also, the shortcuts in this game suck and are pointless. They go back to areas that you visited like several hours beforehand and are nowhere near close to checkpoints or sanctuaries. There's no point to them unless maybe you're doing a speed run or a no teleporting rule. I don't get them. They're pointless. Most of them are absolutely pointless. A smaller nitpick of this game is the finicky activation of items and talking to people. You need to be inside their asshole in order to talk to them. Activate the button press. I don't need to be in someone's asshole in order to talk to them. We can actually have a conversation from across the room. Back to combat, the rolling and blocking in this game can feel slow. This has led to me taking hits from bosses that I felt were unfair and unavoidable. One positive aspect of the game's blocking, though, is that it shields you in a 360-degree manner versus just in front of you. I was initially surprised by this mechanic since it actually helps you out, but maybe the developers realized that blocking and rolling are slow and decided to give us a break. So I believe that this was intentional and a good addition. Good job, guys. My final criticism of this game is the menu. The fucking menu. It can take a half a second for you to be able to take control once the screen pops up. And I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally hit new game instead of continue. Why is this a thing? There's no point to this. Just make navigating the menu easy. Please. Just please do it. Once you can see it, let me take control. Precision is good, guys. Precision is good. Now, I was playing through this game, and I thought I should probably give this game a score so people could hate me because I rated the game too high or too low. And I like being hated by people on the internet. So after all my thoughts, I was going to give the game a 6 out of 10. That was until I reached the last area of the game. I'm not going to spoil anything for you guys, but I cannot express enough how great it was. The atmosphere is fantastic and highly memorable. The music is great. And you know the game is going to end. You're not just wandering around and oops, all of a sudden the game's over. You know it's going to end. The game has multiple endings that you can choose from, and the one I picked was wonderful. The best part of it all was the last boss of the game was the best boss of the game. It's the right combination of challenging and fun. It was hard, but it was also fair. I felt fucking great after beating him. The end of the game was so good that I had to change the score to a 7 out of 10, or a C, or a 3 out of 5 if you like the 5-point scale. Now, people may be disappointed by a 7 out of 10, but it's a very promising grade, I can tell you that. I can tell that these developers know how to make a game and that they have a passion for it. I'm fairly certain this game sold fairly well, so if Ska Studios can take that money they made from this game and use that as a budget for a sequel, I'm confident that they can have enough money to make a detailed, polished, fantastic game. All of the issues I had with this game were serious detractors, in my opinion, but they're also fixable issues. My final recommendation. This is a good game with good mechanics that does have some issues. I do recommend you play it if you're a fan of the Souls series and you like 2D hack and slash and platformer games. This game won't blow you out of the water, but it is an enjoyable time. Thanks for watching my video, guys. This is actually my first review of a game ever, so any comments on how I can change or improve things would be greatly appreciated. If you enjoyed this review, I also let's play the entire game on this channel that you can watch. Or you can watch a video about me being angry about some abbreviations and acronyms. That one's a lot of fun. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a nice day, unless you're an asshole. Peace.